Hey Defenders, now that we have our infrastructure set up, let's add some security in terms of encryption and also authentication to our Kibana instance.
But first, time for my shameless plug. If you want to learn more about our company, head on over to opensecure.co. If you would like to hire us for a project, select the Hire Us button at the top of this video. To see firsthand the power of open source technology, take advantage of our interactive demo. Select the demo button and start exploring. Now let's get back to the video.
So as of now, the way our data is flowing from our Wazoo agent to our Wazoo manager via the Wazoo agent service, that data is encrypted. However, our Wazoo manager to our Elasticsearch, what we set up in previous videos using Filebeat, is over clear text right now. So if anyone were sniffing packets from our Wazoo manager to our Elasticsearch, those would be in clear text, and someone could easily cipher, what data is being sent from our manager to our Elasticsearch, and that data within our case would be Wazoo alerts. So if someone infiltrated the network, was able to then sniff packets from the manager to the elk stack, they would know exactly what your investigators are seeing happening on the network as well. So with that information, they could really mask and hide any malicious activity that they're looking to do. So we'll set up a public and private key pair to handle encryption from the Wazoo manager to the Elastic Stack. And then there's one more piece that we're missing is Kibana right now has no user authentication. So anyone on the internet could go to our Kibana instance and they're given access, right? And this access also gives you and your investigators and anyone who knows this link, right, the ability to view security events from our Wazoo agents as well, which we also want to protect that information, and we don't want someone who doesn't have a particular role to be able to view security event logs within our network. We want to keep that internal with our security team. So there's a few things that we can do to provide that encryption and authentication mechanism. Elasticsearch has a XPack security feature, which is also free, which is nice. So this will handle the encryption in terms of a private and public key pair that Filebeat and Elasticsearch will use, and then we will also set up our user authentication within Kibana. So let's go ahead and do that. So first things first, let me jump onto my Elasticsearch server and my Wazoo manager server. All right, so we have our Elasticsearch server on the right, and then Wazoo provides documentation for these steps as well, and that's on the left side of the screen here. So first, we're going to create a file under user share Elasticsearch, and we'll call it instances.yaml. And what this will do is we can go ahead and just copy over some of the examples that they have. But what we'll do in our case is we will generate certificates for our Wazoo manager, for Elasticsearch, and also for Kibana. So when the Wazoo manager sends its logs to Elasticsearch, that'll be encrypted. And when Kibana queries Elasticsearch for results, that'll also be encrypted. So these three pieces, these three services that run, are what we will set up our encryption for and create certificates for. Notice we don't have the Wazoo agent here. And so if you were to have multiple Wazoo managers, for example, you would just copy and paste with a new name, right? So I would do like Wazoo manager 2, and then I would just change the IP address to say like .11. But in our case, we only have the one. And so what we'll do now is then match up our IP address. So this certificate will be that'll be generated here will be assigned to this specific IP address. So if I go to my Wazoo manager and just run a if config, I'll just go ahead and copy this IP address over. My Elasticsearch server, if I also just run a if config, you see this guy here. So I'll add that here. And then Kibana is also running on this server as well. So this will also take the same IP address. So we'll write that out, save that. And also if you were to have, more Elasticsearch servers within your cluster, you would add those similar to like what we did with the Wazoo manager in the previous example a few minutes back. So we'll save that off. And now Elasticsearch comes pre-bundled with the assert utility. They make it really easy, so we can just copy and paste this guy. And this will call Elasticsearch search utility that comes bundled with Elasticsearch whenever we install it. And what we're also doing is pointing it to, if you see here, we're pointing it to our instances.yaml file that we just created and added our servers within. And then we're going to output those certs to a zip file, and then we'll unzip it here in the next step. So if we go ahead and run that, all right, we see that ran. And we now, if we then go into that directory, we see a certs.zip. So we see that certs.zip was just created, and we're gonna now go ahead and extract that. So we just run an unzip command, and then we'll output them to our user share Elasticsearch directory. So now if I do an ls again, you see our it created a directory for our CA, so our certificate authority, our Wazoo manager, and created our certs, our cert and our key. Elasticsearch created our Elasticsearch cert and Elasticsearch.key, and then the same for Kibana. So now what we need to do is get these certificates moved over accordingly. So first, with Elasticsearch, I don't have to, the Elasticsearch and the Kibana cert, since I generated them on this server, we don't have to move them over, but for the Wazoo manager, we'll use a SCP command to move the certificate over to the Wazoo manager. So first, let's finish configuring the Elasticsearch way, and we will make this directory here. So we'll create this certs/CA directory, and we'll go ahead and copy our certificate authority cert over to the directory that we just created. And this directory that we just created is what will tell Elasticsearch to look into when looking to validate certificates. So we'll go ahead and copy these over. We'll also copy the Elasticsearch cert and the Elasticsearch key over. And the key. And we'll change some ownership and some permissions of the Elasticsearch/certs directory as well. Alright, so now that we have that done, let's go ahead and navigate into that directory and see where these were copied over to. So we do a ls here. We can see our, let me kind of move this over a little bit so that activate Windows is out of y'all's way. So here we see our search directory that we just created. So let's go ahead and go into that guy. Do ls here. We see our Elasticsearch cert, right? So we can view our cert here, and then we can also view our key. So we see our private key, and then we see our cert, and we can also then go into our CA directory and also see that cert that we created as well. So now that those are copied over to the right directory, we now need to tell Elasticsearch within the Elasticsearch.yaml. Sorry, I can't type right now. So within our Elasticsearch.yaml, we'll go ahead and go into this guy. And if you remember, our settings are still the same for telling Elasticsearch where it's going to store its data to, cluster name, etc. So now we'll add a few more settings here. So we'll go ahead and copy over this guy. And this will tell Elasticsearch where our certs are located, and that I also want to enable the XPack security. Right, so that's that's what Elasticsearch calls this feature. It's just this XPack security, so we'll tell it true. The verification mode, we're going to go certificate based. We're going to point to our key, right, our SSL key. So that points to the directory that we just created, etc Elasticsearch search, and we're pointing to our elasticsearch.key. For our certificate, we do the same thing. We point to our elasticsearch.cert, and then we also need to point to our CA, so our certificate authority, right? And we're pointing to our CA cert here, right? And then we're also going to, so that handles the transport layer, and then we're also going to do the HTTP layer as well. So a similar thing, we set XPack enabled to true. We're going certificate based. We point to our key for our SSL key. SSL certificate, we point to our Elasticsearch cert, and then we point to our certificate authority. So we'll go ahead and save that off. And we can scroll down here, and now we can restart the service, and we'll be able to then verify that Elasticsearch came up healthy, and then we'll move on to configuring our Kibana section. All right, so Elasticsearch has restarted. And if I go ahead and run a status on that, we see it's running. And just for an example, so let's jump over to our Wazoo manager. And if you remember a few videos back, we did the Filebeat test output. And that was telling us, running a status check basically on if Filebeat can connect to Elasticsearch. So now that we have this certificate enabled, authentication enabled, if we run the same command, we see an error here, right? So it can't, so Elasticsearch is now actually running on HTTPS. So let's actually make that change. And what we can do is make that change here. And so if we run that test, we see server certificate chain authenticate verification is enabled, and then we get a handshake error. Certificate signed by unknown authority. So it doesn't, since we haven't moved our new certificates over to our Wazoo manager yet, Filebeat can't connect to Elasticsearch and send logs to it. And so that's what we'll take care of here in a sec. But first, let's configure our Kibana for our certificate-based authentication. So we'll do something similar. We'll create a new directory under etc Kibana /cert/ca. So kind of taking the name, the same naming convention there. So we'll go ahead and copy that guy. We'll then copy Kibana's, we'll copy, the same CA cert over, right? So every server participating within this cluster of, Elasticsearch, Kibana, and Filebeat, they're all going to have the same CA, basically saying, hey, the certificate that I'm providing to you was signed by our trusted CA. If I had a certificate that was signed by another CA, Elasticsearch would disregard it. And that's like the error that you're seeing here, certificate signed by unknown authority, right? He's saying, hey, your certificate that you're providing me is not signed by the CA that I trust. So I'm going to disregard your connection attempt and throw you an error. And we will also copy the Kibana cert and key now over. So we can go ahead and do that. And we will also change some ownership of the directory, because right now, now if I go into etc Kibana, run it lslh, you can see that root owns the certs directory. So we want to change that ownership so that the Kibana process or Kibana user can also access this search directory and can read from it. Otherwise, if we were to start up Kibana without that, Kibana wouldn't be, the Kibana user that runs when we start Kibana wouldn't be able to look into this directory to actually see our certs. And then we change also, so now we're changing to, modifying it to a 770, which if we then run an LSLH again, you see permissions have changed of what can be done, right? So now we don't have the read and execute here as well. And now we need to add these paths to the Kibana.yaml. So we'll go ahead and go into this guy. Elasticsearch is now going to point to HTTPS, and the port will say the same, so we don't have to worry about that. We'll then go ahead and copy over our cert. So I'll just uncomment these guys, and we'll handle the authentication piece here in a sec. So we'll leave that still commented out for now. But we're pointing to our certificate authorities, right? We're pointing to our cert. We are pointing to our key. And then we are also pointing to the same down here. And then we'll handle this Elasticsearch authentication portion here in a sec. But we'll go ahead and save that out. We will go ahead and restart Kibana. And let's see if this comes up healthy. All right, and that's looking better. So now let's see if we can connect to this guy. And we will now be, instead of HTTP, which we were connecting with before, we'll go ahead and go HTTPS. And you can see now that we can connect. And so now Kibana is, when it queries Elasticsearch, it is doing that in encrypted manner now with a public and private cert. But you see, we still don't have our authentication mechanism, right? So anyone can still go to this web page and get access to it. And the only difference that we've done is now when Kibana queries Elasticsearch, it's now encrypted, and our traffic from our browser to the Kibana service is also encrypted using HTTPS. And if we also open the certificate here, we can see it was issued by our Elasticsearch certificate tool generated CA, and we can get kind of some more details around that as well. Now, in your production environment, if you want to get this signed by a legitimate CA, you can go ahead and do that as well, and just point to that certificate within Kibana. You would take the same steps. You'd have to just get that cert over to Kibana and Elasticsearch, and that would be, you would use that CA to sign those certs instead of generating a new one. So you can also take that route as well. But if this is just kind of internal, your Elasticsearch, Kibana, and Wazoo managers are all internal within your network, and you're not traversing the internet, then you can use a self-signed cert if you like to. All right, and so now, we see that is working and that looks good. So now let's secure Filebeat and have that communication between the Wazoo manager and Elasticsearch encrypted as well. So first we need to get the cert over to our Wazoo manager, right? So if I go into user share Elasticsearch, so first I need to get the CA cert over to them. So I'll navigate to the CA directory, and we see our CA cert right here. So now we can do an SCP command to copy the CA cert over to the Wazoo manager. So the file that I want to copy is ca.cert, and I'm going to go ahead and point it to my Wazoo manager. So I provide my username, which I'm going to use here as root, and then let's say I just want to copy it into the temp directory. So I'll hit enter. It'll ask me to connect. It'll ask me for the root password, and we can see then that it copied the CA cert over. And so now if I go into the temp directory and run an ls, I see that my file is also here as well. So that's a quick and easy way to copy the certificate over. And so we also need to do the same for the Wazoo manager cert. So I'll do a similar command, but I'm going to copy over the key, all right, and also the cert as well. So I'll say key, I'll ask for my password again, and then we'll copy the cert over as well. And if I run an ls now, you can also see the cert and the key are also here as well. So now let's get these over into Filebeat's directory. So we'll do similar to what we just done before. We'll make a new directory called certs, and then we will go ahead and copy the CA cert. So we'll go ahead and copy CA cert, etc file cert CA, and then we'll copy over the Wazoo manager cert to Filebeat certs. Notice we don't point to the CA directory here, we just point to the search directory. And then we will copy the key over as well. And we'll do some modifications here to this directory. And so now if we go in CD, if we go into Filebeat, we run this, we see our search directory here. Filebeat, the directory can still be the root user or whatever user was created or was used to install Filebeat. But now let's go ahead, and now that we have, let's just verify that our certs are there, and they are, and then our CA cert is there as well. So now we can go ahead and configure the filebeat.yaml. And so what we're going to do here, let me make this a little bigger for you guys, is we're going to use the similar to what we use with Kibana and Elasticsearch. So first we have our output set to HTTPS. This is just template enablement, so we don't need to worry about that. The block we're worried about here is this guy. So we'll also change our output to HTTPS. So another change we could do is just erase this portion, and Filebeat will read that, oh, the protocol we're using HTTPS, so I'm going to append that on to, that's the connection protocol I'm going to use for this connection. We're then also going to add our Elasticsearch cert, key, and CA. Oh, and this username, I'll leave that commented out for now. So this actually needs to change. This is pointing to an Elasticsearch.cert. We will actually point to our file Wazoo manager.cert is what we called it. So I'll just go ahead and copy this portion so I don't have to type it in. So Wazoo manager.cert, our Wazoo manager key, and then our CA cert stays the same. Oh, but this also changed to Elasticsearch. So if you remember, we stored them in our etc Filebeat certs directory. And so I'll make those changes here. And then we'll leave this commented out, and we'll get there. We'll get to that section here in a second. So I'll go ahead and save that out. Now let's do a Filebeat test output, and you see that our so we see that the certificate chain verification is enabled. We see we get a handshake back. It's using TLS version 1.3 for setting its encryption algorithm, which is good. And then we're able to connect and talk to the server. So that looks good. So now Filebeat is now sending data to Elasticsearch encrypted, which is exactly what we want to happen. Now let's configure the back half of this, which is the authentication. So Authentication will provide us the ability to set users within Kibana itself, so we can control who and who can't access Kibana. And then Filebeat will also have this user set as well. So Filebeat will use a certificate, and it will also use username and password when connecting to Elasticsearch. So we can go ahead and restart Filebeat, and now let's add authentication. So we'll go back into Filebeat, into our Elasticsearch server, and you see we need to add this XPack security enabled to true. So let's go ahead and go into our Elasticsearch.yaml. I'll just come to the bottom here, and we'll add our XPack security set to true. Notice it's different than our SSL enabled true, set to true. Right? So this will be a separate block that we just add really anywhere within this file. For this demo, I'll just add it here. We'll go ahead and save that. We'll then restart Elasticsearch. And then what we're going to do is Elasticsearch comes with pre-built roles and users that, like, there will be a Kibana user, an Elasticsearch user. There's a few other ones that are pre-built, and we'll see those here in a sec. But Elasticsearch has restarted and looks to be good. So now Elasticsearch also provides a binary that we can easily just call to set up passwords. So I'll go ahead and copy that. And what this will do is, once this runs, it'll generate these pre-built users and roles. So you can see here it's initiating, I'll make this bigger for us, initiating the setup of passwords for reserved users. So these are users that come pre-built in, and you see Elastic, there's Kibana System, Logstash, SystemBeat, and a few others. So we'll go ahead and hit yes to that. So it's asking for a password for Elastic, and I'm just gonna do, for demo purposes, please subscribe. I'm actually just changed that to just password, so I'm just gonna do password for all of these. All right, and so it made those changes for us. So now that we've created the users and assigned passwords for them, of course, in a legitimate environment, you want to use stronger passwords and create your own passwords. And then we will go ahead and restart Elasticsearch one more time, and then we'll configure Kibana and Elasticsearch Filebeat to use this new user authentication. We'll do that with this block here once Elasticsearch restarts. So Elasticsearch is restarted. Let's go ahead and go into Kibana. And okay, so here we already have the block enabled. So we'll uncomment this guy to say XPack security enabled to true. The Elasticsearch username we're going to use is just the Elastic one. And then we can leave that server default route commented out, and we'll go ahead and use this Elasticsearch password, and the password that I gave was just password. And this will be the password that you use in the previous step that you assign to the Elastic user. So we'll do that. I'll go ahead and comment that guy. And now we can restart Kibana. So Kibana will now not only use the certificate base to connect to Elasticsearch, but it'll also use the username and password that we just gave it. So we can watch the status to make sure that it starts up correctly. And we can also move over to our Filebeat here. So also within Filebeat, we will give it the username and password that we want to use as well. So we will uncomment this guy, and then we will go ahead and copy this over. And here we gave the username also, the password was password. So we're using the same username that we just assigned within the Kibana.yaml, as well as the same password. And if we do a test output, you can see that we can still connect, so that's good. So if this password were to be off, right, so I just did password 1, you see we get a 401 unauthorized. So with this new user authentication, we're authorizing people that can and cannot connect to Elasticsearch. So go ahead and copy that. We do a test output again. We see that is working, and we'll go ahead and restart Filebeat. And so now, assuming that Kibana came up good, which it looks like it did, we can reload this page, and now we will have our user authentication that we need to provide. And so here we get this login page now asking for us to, instead of directly taking us to Kibana and giving us the ability to query our logs and view our logs, we now have authentication that we have to provide. So for right off the bat, once you set this up, before you create users for yourself and other members of your team, you can use this Elastic user to authenticate. So, and then the password will be the password that you configured within your Filebeat.yaml and Kibana.yaml. It'll be the same password that you used when you created this user. So we can authenticate right off the bat. And so now what we can do is, you see we've logged in. You can see our Elastic user has logged in. So internally, you can either have all users with your team use the Elastic username and password to log into. Of course, you then struggle with non-repudiation, as it'd be more difficult to determine who did what at a specific time. So what I also like to do is then create users, separate user accounts that can log into Kibana and are assigned to various people on my team. So if we go into the stack management tab here, you can see our security tab. So we can go ahead and select users. You can see also our pre-built users that were built when we ran that binary to create our Elastic username and password. So we can go ahead and create a user. For this purpose, I'll just use open secure. I'll do a password of please subscribe. All right, and email address we can leave blank. Of course, just for this demo purpose, you can more than welcome to set it up within your personal cluster. And then we're going to add a role. So, and we'll get into a little bit more of this later, but you can assign roles to users, which restrict them to maybe particular dashboards, to particular logs, particular plugins within Kibana, so like our Wazoo app, for example. And you can get pretty complex with it, so that will entail another video, but just be aware that you can really limit what people have access to within Kibana. And for our purpose and for members of my team, I just like to give them the super user role, which is privileged to everything, privileges to index, to dashboards, to visualizations, and everything. So we'll go ahead and create that user. So if you can see, he has been created. And what we can do is then go ahead and log out of Elastic. Log out of Kibana. We're logging out of Kibana here. And I'll go ahead and use my username and password that I just created. And you can see we are now being authenticated to log in. And you can see my username is now open secure. And the Wazoo plugin app also has security that we can set as well. So if we select users, we can see our two users here. And so since I'm logged in as open secure now, we are also limited to what we can do within the Wazoo UI now. So now I can create a user, so we'll call it open secure as well. Password, we can give it a password of please subscribe. So I'll just duplicate what I have for Kibana login. Subscribe. And I will also give this guy a administrator role. But we can do the same thing, right? We can say, like a DC Ops member of my team or a or sorry, not of my team, DC Ops member of another team, say we want to give them Wazoo access because they're in charge, they maintain the Wazoo agent status. So if a server Wazoo agent was to go offline for whatever reason, we could give them access to view the agents tab within Wazoo to see what servers are offline or not. Let's see what it's complaining about. Since it didn't like my password of please subscribe. Use something else. Okay, give them the admin role and apply that. And you can see our user is now created. And we have the admin role, so we can then go into like our agents tab and view the status of these guys, and go into our security events and also view logs of that. So just to kind of recap, in this video we covered encrypting. First of all, encrypting our Filebeat to Elasticsearch, right? So that traffic being passed from our Wazoo manager using Filebeat to Elasticsearch is now encrypted using a TLS 1.3 algorithm there. And we then, the same was also done for Kibana to Elasticsearch. So, Kibana is also querying Elasticsearch when we run like our Discover, for example. So when I select this tab, Kibana is telling Elasticsearch, hey, bring me all the logs from the Wazoo monitoring. We'll go to the Wazoo alerts index within the last 24 hours and give them back to me, right? And that communication is now encrypted. And then we also gave our Kibana instance and Elasticsearch and Filebeat user authentication as well. So now I can control what users I give access to access Kibana. And now, instead of traversing the internet in clear text as well using HTTP, we're now connecting via HTTPS, right? And we're also now able to control who and who can't access our Kibana UI, which is crucial, because if you have access to this, you can see all security events going on within your network, right? So it's always important to lock this guy down, and I appreciate you guys spending the time with me.
And as always, let me know down below what you liked or disliked about this video, any errors I may have made, as well as recommendations for other open source tools you think I should explore.